Hey there, welcome to the first video of the Q&A with KJA channel series, whatever you want to call it. This is the first video in a series. I think I'm going to make this first series all about losing weight and different methods to do so. That's probably the most common question that I get asked is how to lose weight. And this first thing I'm going to talk about is fasting, and it's great because don't need a gym, don't need anything. All it is eating all your meals within a specific window of time. Alright, so the article that I want to get into specifically is called Time Restrictive Feeding is a Preventative and Therapeutic Intervention Against Diverse Nutritional Challenges. And they looked at fasting in a couple different regards, and we'll get into that in a second. They did use mice in their study, so that does limit its applications to humans a little bit, but we do share a lot of similar physiology, so I just wanted to be upfront with that. First off, what is fasting? They specifically refer to it as time-restricted feeding, but it's the same thing as fasting. All it means is you're eating within a specific time window. So if you choose a 10-hour feeding window route, if you have your first meal at 8 in the morning, you would have your last meal at 6 p.m. So if you're someone who likes to eat later at night, you would have to eat later in the morning, obviously. So there was a couple different groups of mice, and they looked at a couple different windows of time with regards to eating. So they had a group of mice that had access to food 8 hours a day. They had one 12 hours a day, 15 hours a day, and whenever. But all the groups were calorically equivalent, meaning that they ate the same amount of calories. It was just how the window of time essentially was the factor that they kind of manipulated. So essentially what these researchers found was that an 8 to 9 hour window of feeding showed the best results. So that means if you have your first meal at 8 in the morning, you would have your last meal at 4 p.m. So it is a little bit challenging, or might be a little bit hard to get used to, or you might, how I do it, I just eat breakfast, or I just eat my first meal a little bit later in the day. That way, so when I get home off work, I can eat, and I don't have to plan my dinner time when I'm at work or doing something like that. So a couple highlights from the study. So they found that the time-restricted eating protects against excess body weight, regardless of caloric intake, irrespective of time schedule or initial body weight even. So, like as I said earlier, all the calories for the groups were the same. But mice fed in the 8-hour condition showed about 20% less weight gain compared to the 15-hour window group, and about 40% less weight gain compared to the group of mice that ate whenever they wanted. One thing that I really liked about this study is that they made it even more comparable to the human lifestyle, is that they tried the 8-hour window 5 days a week, and then with 2 days a week they're a little bit more lax on the feeding window. So that's just like 5-day work week and 2-day week, and then people are a little bit more lenient with their diet on the weekends, and I feel like that was a great way or a great methodology to add to the study. The next highlight of this study is that the time-restricted eating, so the 8-hour window, reduced whole body fat accumulation and inflammation associated with that. So the 8-hour window paradigm showed about 50% less whole body fat compared to mice that just ate regardless of a time schedule. They analyzed the rats after they had died, so they took sections of their fat. They examined the lipid droplets of the mice that could eat whenever they want were actually way bigger than the lipid droplets of the mice that were fed in a time-restricted mode. Also, total triglycerides in the liver were significantly reduced in the fasted rats, so they had less fatty livers. Another highlight of this study was that the time-restricted feeding improved glucose tolerance, and it reduced insulin resistance. So definitely fasting might be something to look into if you're pre-diabetic or experiencing some of those symptoms. And what was really amazing is that they found that time-restricted feeding reversed the effects of glucose intolerance that was brought on by diet-induced obesity. So essentially, they got these rats fat, then they switched their diet protocol into the time-restricted feeding, and it reversed the effects of glucose intolerance. So these rats were able to utilize glucose more efficiently. Another one of the major highlights of this study is that the time-restricted feeding improved nutrient homeostasis. So essentially they had these rats just run on a treadmill until exhaustion, essentially. And the mice that had the 8-hour window showed remarkably increased endurance. So the free-for-all group, their average was about 50 minutes of running. The 12-hour group, they ran for about 70 minutes. And the 8-hour group, the 8-hour fasted group, averaged about 140 minutes. So about double. So the 8-hour group managed about double the time on the treadmill compared to a 12-hour fasting, and significantly over, almost 3 times the amount of time on the treadmill as the free-for-all group. And the researchers hypothesized this wasn't due to an increase in any muscle. They hypothesized that it was specifically they showed a better metabolic response and were able to mobilize their energy stores at a way more efficient rate than the rats in the free-for-all or even the 12-hour fasting window. One of the last little highlights is that the 8-hour window group had significantly less overall cholesterol levels compared to the free-for-all group. Alright, so what does this mean for you? If you're someone who doesn't necessarily want to change what you eat, why don't you try just changing when you eat it? So an 8-hour feeding window would be optimal. So if you have your first meal at 10 a.m., that means your last meal would be at 6 p.m. If you can't do the 8-hour window, a 10-hour window has seen some benefits, but that's kind of the cutoff. So if you want to get the most bang for your buck, the 8-hour window is optimal. 10-hour window, not bad, definitely an improvement. So yeah, try it out and let me know how it goes.